if Israel carries out the ground invasion. We've seen many Western leaders travel to Israel in the past few days. All of them have raised this concern. Today was Emmanuel Macron's turn, the French president. He held talks with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli president. He offered his full support to Israel, but there was a gentle reminder too. Listen in.
La lutte doit être sans merci.
The fight must be merciless, but not without rules, because we are democracies which fight against terrorists. Democracies which therefore respect the laws of war and ensure humanitarian access. Democracies which do not target civilians of Gaza or anywhere. Respect for the population requires, in this case, to allow access to aid, to restore electricity for hospitals, for the sick and the injured, without allowing this electricity to be used to wage war.
De rétablir, et nous en avons longuement parlé très en détail.
That's the external pressure. The second kind of pressure is at home. Many Israelis want Netanyahu to resign, to take responsibility for the Hamas attack on October 7th. A recent poll, in fact, found that 80% of Israelis blame Netanyahu for what happened. And that includes his ministers. Reports say 3 of them are planning to resign. 3 Israeli ministers are planning to resign. It's their way of protesting against the prime minister. It's their way of saying, you must resign too. Former government officials have said the same, like ex-Prime Minister Ehud Barak and former IDF chief Dan Halutz. Despite this, Netanyahu hangs on. Forget the resignation, he's not even apologized. His cabinet ministers have apologized. The defense chiefs have also apologized. Even the intelligence heads have said sorry. It's just Netanyahu who's not. So the Gaza invasion is politically important for him. Maybe the only way to redeem himself. But history shows us that such decisions should never be political. They must be rooted in strategy and logic. If not, they will backfire. Joe Biden warned Netanyahu about this. He asked Israel to not make America's mistakes after 9/11. But as things stand, an invasion is more likely because Biden and company do not keep Netanyahu in power. The people of Israel do. Now let's talk about the cost of this war. More than 5,500 people have died on both sides. More than 15,000 have been injured. Tens of thousands displaced, and many more suffering the horrors of war. And this conflict is expanding. Israel wants a ground operation, so the cost will only shoot up, including the economic cost. And tonight we want to dwell on this last part, the economic cost. What will the war mean for Israel's economy? The Bank of Israel has released an assessment. Growth has taken a hit. Economic output will contract. By how much? At least 2 to 3%. This is for the third and fourth quarters. The budget deficit is likely to rise, and Israel's currency, the shekel, is losing its value. It has fallen to an 8-year low. This is against the US dollar. The shekel is falling. As of today, Israel's economy is in a state of limbo. Earlier, it was expected to grow at a rate of 3%. But now, if the war continues, economic growth will cool. The growth rate is projected to fall to 2.3% for the remainder of this year, 2.3% in 2023 or what remains of it. What about the next year? It's expected to be slightly better. Israel's central bank is projecting a growth rate of 2.8% in 2024. And here's something that you must know. This is an aberration. In its 75-year history, Israel has witnessed many conflicts and wars, but its economy has remained surprisingly robust. Today, Israel is seen as a tech powerhouse, a key innovation hub in West Asia, with a diverse free market economy. But this war is testing Israel's resilience. The priorities have shifted. The military has been given a blank check. Israel wants to win this war at all costs, and its army says it is ready to strike.
Our fighters are ready and determined in the field. They continue training for the day the order is given. We have long weeks of fighting ahead of us. We will act on the most suitable operational timing and according to political instructions.
About 360,000 reservists have been called up. This is an unprecedented mobilization. These people were engaged in other jobs. Now they're fighting the war. So overnight, Israel has lost 360,000 workers. They've gone out of the economy. Businesses are short-staffed. There are fewer taxis on the streets. Several stores are closed and people are leaving their homes. Take the case of Sderot. It's a border town. It's barely 12 kilometers from Gaza. We visited Sderot 2 weeks ago. It used to be buzzing with activity, but after the Hamas attack, it has become a ghost town. About 30,000 people used to live there. Now, going by some accounts, more than 90% of Sderot's citizens have left. And where have they gone? Many have shifted temporarily to other parts of the country, and this is happening in most border towns in Israel. Life has been disrupted, and these people do not know when they'll go back home, when they'll return to their normal lives, what normal life will look like now. This has the makings of a drawn-out conflict. Economists and ratings agencies are watching these developments in Israel. At least 2 credit agencies have issued warnings. They say Israel's debt could be downgraded. The World Bank too has issued a warning. It comes from the World Bank President Ajay Banga. He says we are at a dangerous juncture and that this war could deal a serious blow to the world. The biggest worry, of course, is related to the oil prices, even though Israel is neither a major producer nor a supplier of oil. But the conflict is drawing in regional powers. And that is a big worry. Because wars in West Asia tend to disrupt the energy markets. Think of the Iranian Revolution of 1978, the Iran-Iraq War of 1980, the first Persian Gulf War of 1990. All of them triggered a spike in oil prices. So markets are nervous. Global oil prices rose marginally today. Traders are keeping a close eye on Israel. A ground offensive and a wider conflict could impact the entire region and bleed the world. Now let's turn our attention to the north, to a player with high stakes in the region and in the Israel-Hamas war. We're talking about Turkey and their president Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He's caught between a rock and a hard place. Let me explain why I say this. Erdogan thinks of himself as a great statesman. He wants the world to believe that he is a great leader. His country is also a NATO member, and they're expected to help Western allies and support Israel. At the same time, Erdogan also wants to position himself as a champion of Muslims, the new age caliph, reviving the Ottoman glory, which is why he keeps talking about Kashmir and wading into issues that he has no business talking about. Now, in this role, he is expected to support the Palestinians. And these two images, statesman and religious champion, have collided. Add to this Erdogan's personal ambition. He wants to be a peace broker, but you can't do all the three. Support Israel, support Hamas, and mediate between the two. So he's walking a tightrope, trying to appease both factions. Erdogan has taken the least controversial stance since this war began. Listen to what he said.
We want the Israeli administration to stop their bombardment of Palestine soil, beginning with Gaza, and the Palestinians to stop their harassment of civilian settlements in Israel.
So he's blamed both sides for the conflict and asked both of them to stop. This is a far cry from his position a few years ago. In the past, Erdogan has openly favored Palestinians, but over time, his relations with Israel have also improved. And evidently, he does not want to jeopardize that, the relationship with Israel. So he's taken a balanced approach. His administration is also trying to be useful to its Western allies.
We have received requests from various countries, especially on the issue of their citizens being released. As a result of this, we have launched talks on these issues, especially with Hamas's political wing. Our efforts are continuing, especially for the release of foreigners, civilians and children.
That was the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan. He's been on a diplomatic shuttle since the Israel-Hamas war began, going from one country to the next, securing Turkey's interests. And he just mentioned a very important part of those interests, contacts with Hamas's political wing. You see, Turkey has always favored this group, Hamas. Senior Hamas members have made a home in Turkey, like the chairperson of the Hamas political wing, Ismail Haniyeh. His children reportedly have Turkish passports, as do other senior members of Hamas. Haniyeh divides his time between Turkey and Qatar. He has a base in both these countries. Currently, he's in Qatar. Reports say the Turkish establishment asked him to leave for a while. Other senior Hamas leaders were also politely asked to leave. Erdogan apparently did not want the bad publicity. Their presence was problematic for the would-be mediator. Now, Turkey has denied all these reports, but perhaps the damage has already been done. So far, 4 hostages have been released by Hamas. And it seems Qatar and Egypt are at the forefront of those talks. Turkey is lagging behind in its efforts. And that's not the only bad news for Erdogan. Reports say Ankara is also facing the heat from Western allies. They want Turkey to sever ties with Hamas. And that's something Erdogan is unlikely to do. So instead, he is looking to placate the West. He's making concessions elsewhere. Yesterday, Turkey offered its fellow NATO members an olive branch. Erdogan set in motion the process to induct Sweden to make it a NATO member.
Yeah, we welcome that step. Obviously, we have been calling for ratification of Sweden's accession for some time, and we look forward to that bill being considered in the Turkish parliament and passed as soon as possible.
Sweden has been wanting to join NATO since last year, but Erdogan was the roadblock. It seems he's finally relented in an effort to calm his Western allies. As I said, Ankara has been walking a tightrope. It's what you get when you try to run with the hares and hunt with the hounds. Our next story is about China and its border standoff with India. The latest one has been on for 3 years now, and it won't be resolved anytime soon. That's the assessment from the United States of America. The US has released a full report on China's border coercion. Tonight, we'll bring you the details. How does America see China's tactics on the border with India? The US says the threat from China is here to stay, and that's the headline. The PLA has not changed its posture, and its deployments are unlikely to reduce soon. The US believes China will maintain the same troop levels, and this is an important high-level assessment. It's been put together by the Pentagon, it's been submitted to the US Congress, and it gives insights into China's growing military capabilities and its activities in the region. This report is more than 200 pages long. It covers several flashpoints from Taiwan to the South China Sea and the Pacific. But tonight we'll focus on the section that talks about the India-China border. It's 300 odd kilometers long. This border, it is divided into 3 sectors: the western sector in Ladakh, the central sector in Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh, and the eastern sector along Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim. The current standoff is in the western sector in Ladakh. Quick background: in 2020, China sent a large number of troops there. They clashed with Indian soldiers, there were casualties on both sides, and since then China has not pulled back its troops. Now the US has studied these Chinese deployments, and it gives a breakdown in this Pentagon report. It says China has 1 border regiment in the western sector. It is supported by 2 troop divisions. They've been sent from Xinjiang and Tibet. Now, what are regiments and divisions? They're basically military units. A regiment is a bit like a small team in a sports league. It has soldiers and officers. They usually specialize in one task, and they have a few thousand personnel. A division, on the other hand, is much larger in size, sort of like the entire sports league. It has 10 to 15,000 personnel, plus support staff like medics, engineers, and officers handling logistics. So the US says China has deployed 1 regiment and 2 divisions along the western border with India. And apart from these, China also maintains a reserve force there. They're called Combined Arms Brigades, or CABs. These are essentially combat teams. Their members are drawn from different areas. They come with different skill sets, like the weapons they can operate or the warfare tactics they've mastered. The idea is to encourage integrated operations. China keeps 4 such teams in the reserves, and all of these teams are exclusively for the border with India. So that's the breakup. How many troops in all? There are conflicting reports, but most of them are in the range of 50 to 60,000 troops. That's what China maintains at the border with India, 50 to 60,000 soldiers. In August, there was talk of de-escalation. That's when Prime Minister Modi had a rare conversation with Xi Jinping. They met in Johannesburg. They were there for the BRICS summit. Prime Minister Modi and President Xi spoke on the sidelines, and there was an agreement.
In a conversation with President Xi Jinping of China, Prime Minister highlighted India's concerns on the unresolved issues along the LAC in the western sector of the India-China border areas. The 2 leaders agreed to direct their relevant officials to intensify efforts at expeditious disengagement and de-escalation.
Well, that was 2 months ago, and what happened after that? Nothing. China is yet to commit to any kind of withdrawal. Earlier this month, there was a meeting, the 20th round of military talks between India and China. Military commanders from both sides met. They held talks for 2 days. No breakthrough. Clearly, China is not serious about de-escalation. Instead, it is boosting military infrastructure. And the US assessment says the same thing. It says China has added more facilities in the last year. Let me quote from this report. These improvements include underground storage facilities near Doklam, new roads in all 3 sectors of the LAC, new villages in disputed areas in neighboring Bhutan, a second bridge over the Pangong Lake, a dual-purpose airport near the center sector, and multiple helipads. This is what China has built. Of course, India is aware of this threat. It maintains similar troop levels. Reports say the Indian Army is now preparing for winter. There will be a redeployment of troops and heightened surveillance. So the understanding is clear. China poses a long-term challenge for India. The Pentagon report only confirms that. And the big takeaway is this: the Chinese threat is growing and it's here to stay. So China is not keen on solving the India border, but elsewhere it seems very keen. I'm talking about Bhutan. Like with India, it's a disputed border, the Bhutan-China border. But it may not be that case for long. On Monday, Bhutan's foreign minister visited Beijing. He met with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. And what did they discuss? The border. Wang Yi asked Bhutan to seize the moment, to settle the border as soon as possible. He also asked Bhutan to establish formal diplomatic relations with China. And how did Bhutan respond? Their foreign minister agreed to an early settlement. He also supported the idea of formal diplomatic relations. Now, why is all of this significant? The border issue dates back to the 1940s and 50s. Bhutan and Tibet always had a border, but China does not recognize that. So after annexing Tibet, China laid claims to land controlled by Bhutan, including this region. It's called Doklam. It's located at the junction, the tri-junction between China, Bhutan and India. Right now, Bhutan controls it. It controls Doklam, and India recognizes Bhutan's sovereignty over Doklam. But China does not. In 2017, China made moves. Its army, the PLA, tried to build a road on the Bhutanese side. And that's when India intervened. What followed was what we call the Doklam standoff. Indian and Chinese soldiers faced off for close to 2 months in Doklam. In the end, Beijing backed down, but the issue was never resolved. And now Doklam is on the table again. Bhutan and China will have to exchange land to settle their border. India fears this exchange could involve Doklam. And that's a serious issue. I'll tell you why. Doklam is located close to India's Siliguri corridor. It's the link between mainland India and the northeast. If you cut that off, you cut off the northeast from India. So having PLA troops in Doklam is a problem for New Delhi. It was a worry in 2017. It remains a worry today. Now, Bhutan has not confirmed whether Doklam is on the table, but the possibility itself is worrying. So that's the border issue. The second is about diplomatic relations. Again, it's an old one. Bhutan does not have formal relations with the P5. That's the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. They have exchanges and visits, but no formal diplomatic relations, Bhutan and these 5 countries, meaning there is no embassy. Bhutan says it's all about staying away from big power politics. You let one country open an embassy and everyone will line up. Historically, Bhutan has tried to prevent that. Their preferred partner was India. Their security, their foreign policy, all of it was decided in partnership with India. But now Bhutan is making a U-turn, it seems. They're talking about formal relations with China. The question is, where does all of this leave India? In a spot of bother. There will be questions about New Delhi's role in these talks. For starters, is India even at the table? Is Doklam on the agenda? Is Bhutan consulting India? And has India signed off on Bhutan's border package? Some of these questions were put to Bhutan's Prime Minister recently. Let me quote from what he said in response. We need to ensure we are considering interests of all parties, meaning India and China. It will be in Bhutan's interest to make sure both the parties are happy with the decisions that we make. We obviously do not want to solve one problem and give birth to another problem. So Bhutan is mindful of India's interests. Still, New Delhi will not be happy because Bhutan was always India's backyard. So talks with China should have been on India's terms. In the past, that was always the case, but right now it doesn't seem so. And that leaves India in a tricky spot. Now let's look over India's other border, where Pakistanis had mixed fortunes yesterday. On the one hand, they saw a great victory for democracy. Pakistan's Supreme Court stood up for the rights of its citizens. It gave a rare rebuke to the all-powerful Pakistani army. And that was the good news. It affects everyone in Pakistan, but perhaps not tangibly. You see, you cannot really put a number on your democracy being protected. But you can put a number on higher prices, like 193%. That's how much Pakistan raised the price of natural gas by. 193, almost 200%. This too took place yesterday, and it left a bitter aftertaste for anyone celebrating the rare democratic gains. Here's a report.
When it comes to Pakistan, you almost never get good news without bad news. We'll start with the good news. Pakistan may have got a boost to its democracy. Pakistan's Supreme Court was hearing a case challenging the military, specifically the decision to try ordinary people in military courts. There are over 100 ordinary Pakistanis caught in the military's clutches. They all have something in common. They are supporters of former Prime Minister Imran Khan. On the 9th of May, their anger had reached a boiling point. Their hero, Imran Khan, was arrested and detained on corruption charges. He says he was practically abducted. That set off mass protests targeted towards Pakistan's military. Now, it's no secret that the Pakistani military is the real power in the country. It picks puppet politicians to exercise control and punishes the puppets who try and become independent, very much like Imran Khan. Well, on May 9th, his supporters had seen enough. They unleashed their fury on the Pakistani military. They even burnt down some military installations. About 5 people were killed and thousands were arrested in the aftermath of the riots. The most dangerous protesters were supposed to be tried by the military. But now, the Pakistani Supreme Court has stepped in. It has ruled that military trials for civilians are unconstitutional, which should be obvious. Military trials are shrouded in secrecy. Their functioning is opaque, meant only for sensitive military matters, not for some angry political protester. That's an abuse of power, an intimidation tactic by the Pakistani military. The country's Supreme Court has decided that enough was enough. It ruled that it was unconstitutional for the military to try civilians, not just in this case but in other instances too. Many say it's a great ruling for Pakistan's democracy. They say some civilians who were unjustly imprisoned by the military in the past have hope now. Pakistan's Supreme Court has also shown itself to be independent of the country's overbearing military. Despite this, the firecrackers weren't going off across Pakistan, because first, there's always an appeal process. Pakistan's government is expected to appeal this ruling. Also, for the ordinary Pakistani, there is little to cheer. Making ends meet was already a daily battle, so the news of another price hike was a brutal blow. Pakistan's interim government has hiked natural gas prices for almost all consumers. Domestic consumers will see a hike of about 172%. It will cost about 137% more for commercial consumers. But the worst affected will be Pakistan's cement manufacturers. They will see a 193% hike. That's almost triple of what they pay now. Very conveniently, it's Pakistan's interim government that has struck this blow. No elected government will bear the political backlash as the people get crushed under the enormous hikes. The Supreme Court ruling and the price hike capture Pakistan in a nutshell. Fleeting hope of democracy, a vengeful and controlling military, lack of political accountability, and the ordinary citizens bearing the brunt of it all.
الرؤية المصرية، وبالتالي هاتان إسرائيليتان الآن تنجح الجهود المصرية في الإفراج عنهم
اللازمة.
دعنا نشير محمد إلى أن التفاوض في مثل هذه الظروف يكون بالغ الصعوبة، وهذا يرشح لأن الجهود المصرية كانت مكثفة وعملت على مسارات متزاوية يعني متزامنة ومتوازنة بشكل كبير ما بين كل الأطراف للوصول إلى هذه اللحظة بوصول سيدتين إسرائيليتين محتجزتين كانتا محتجزتين في قطاع غزة والآن هم في الأراضي المصرية
ينحو تدريجيا نحو فكرة أن هناك طرفا آخر لا عادة ولا يستعمله الدبلوماسيون، يقولون مثلا نرحب به، ولكن هذا التعبير يدل بالفعل على أن الولايات المتحدة ترى في ذلك مؤشرا جيدا عن ذلك بشكل صريح، ولكن هناك طلبات أمريكية أو استعملت وسائل الإعلام الأمريكية لفظ نصائح أمريكية.
We are very emotional and happy of the formal announcement that my grandmother Yocheved Lifshitz and Nurit Cooper, both of them from Kibbutz Nir Oz, are coming back to us due to a humanitarian act. And I'm very excited as we all are here expecting them and expecting more improvements to all of the captives from our kibbutz and in general, and we just hope that she is okay and in good health. We will go see her now.
They say sports is like a balm. Even in the worst of times, just look at your sports team. Maybe you'll feel better. But in Pakistan, I won't advise that. Their cricket team is in India for the World Cup, and so far, things haven't clicked for them. They've lost 3 matches on the trot. First to India, the second to Australia, and the third to Afghanistan yesterday. That last one was a stunning World Cup upset. Pakistan is ranked number 2 in the World Cup. Afghanistan is ranked 9th. So for them to beat Pakistan is massive. It was Afghanistan's first ever victory over their neighbor. And it wasn't just about the win. It was about how they won. A comprehensive victory by 8 wickets. The crowd in Chennai was ecstatic. In fact, that's been a feature of all Afghanistan matches. The Indian crowd has been right behind them, whether it's turning up in Afghan colours or holding up their flag or cheering for every wicket. We've spoken about people-to-people relations between the two countries, India and Afghanistan. Well, this is it. Plus, Afghanistan has been playing quality cricket. You see, most upsets are miracles. There's always 1 or 2 moments that swing the momentum, moments you don't expect. But this match was not like that. Afghanistan dominated from ball 1. It never looked like they would lose. Now, we could dissect what went wrong for Pakistan. We could discuss the technicalities, but frankly, that's pointless because their former players are already doing it. And there is no way we can top them. Listen to this.
हम चीखे मार रहे हैं शो पे 3 हफ्ते से कि 2 साल से इनका फिटनेस टेस्ट नहीं हुआ। अब मैं लड़कों के इंडिविजुअल नाम लूं, इतने उनके मुंह हुए हैं, लगता है रोज कोई 8-8 किलो कढ़ाई खाने ने, निहारियां खाने ने। भाई कोई टेस्ट भी तो होना चाहिए। अब इन प्रोफेशनली यू गाइज आर getting paid, playing for your country, and there has to be a certain criteria.
Like I said, there is no topping that. So let's focus on Afghanistan instead. The country has been through a lot in the last couple of years. In 2021, the Taliban captured power. They turned the clock back to the late 20th century. No sports, no women's rights, no financial opportunities, nothing. Cricket was a bit of an exception. The women's team was not completely stamped out. It was, in fact, completely stamped out. Most of the players now live in Australia. But the men's team survived. The players are now based in the United Arab Emirates. Until last year, they played their home games in India, but in 2022, they struck a new deal. The UAE is now their designated home. Every other team can play in front of their home crowd. They can host bilateral series, but Afghanistan cannot. Even their so-called home games are abroad. And think about the players. Many of them have families back home, like Rashid Khan. He's arguably the most popular Afghan cricketer. But in 2021, his family was stranded in Afghanistan. Can you imagine the horror? I'm sure most Afghan cricketers have a similar story. And despite that, they pushed on. You heard Pakistani veterans mocking their team's fitness. You won't hear that about Afghanistan. Their players have put in the hard yards. And they have combined talent with hard work. And now you see the results. Pakistan was actually Afghanistan's second victory of the tournament. The first was against England, the defending ODI champions. Talk about historical revenge. These are two countries that shaped Afghanistan's history, and not in a good way. The English invaded Afghanistan in the 19th century. Pakistan created the Taliban, so I guess yesterday's win was sweet revenge. It also tells you how skilled this team is. These are not fluke performances. They have shown consistency so far. We keep hearing that cricket teams represent the hopes of their people. Like here in India, we say the men in blue represent a billion hopes. But in Afghanistan, cricket may be the only hope. And that's a different level of pressure. You know your country is already suffering from the Taliban, from earthquakes, from poverty. So there is added pressure to do well, to give your people something to celebrate. And it's a pressure that these players are mindful of.
As you said, it does mean a lot back home to the people of our country. As you know, as we all know the situation back home, the earthquake also a few days ago hit, and there is not a lot of happiness in the country without cricket. So at least we have given them some moments of happiness tonight.
Even the logistics is messed up. The Taliban fired the Afghan cricket board, the board chief in 2021. The board is now controlled by the Taliban. Yet the team plays under the old flag, the green, black and red one, not the Taliban's official flag. Why do you think that is? Because even the Taliban recognizes the importance of this team. They're national heroes. After yesterday's result, the Taliban in fact congratulated them. They said, the victory showed Afghans can win in any field. We agree, Afghans can win in any field. The only thing holding them back is the Taliban. Yesterday's match showed the power of sports. It made an entire country forget their troubles. Afghans hit the streets dancing and singing. For a brief moment, it was like the last 3 years did not happen. Yet sports cannot erase reality. The same celebrations were proof of that. Because you heard firecrackers on one side and AK-47 gunfire on the other. Do you know what's the OECD? It's the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, basically a club of rich countries, high-income countries. It's a club that has 38 members, including the US, France, Germany, Italy and Canada. These are also the go-to countries for migrants. From the world over, people want to go and live there. Last year, 2.8 million people did that. 2.8 million foreign nationals migrated to an OECD country. It was a record high. Do you know who topped this list? Indians. They migrated to rich countries in the highest numbers, and that's not all. Indians also led the race in getting foreign citizenship. Most of them chose America, and guess what? India and Canada may be at odds, but Indians continue to get Canadian citizenship. The highest number of foreign nationals acquiring Canadian citizenship were Indians. The question is why? Why are so many Indians renouncing the Indian citizenship? Here's a report.
Diplomatic relations between India and Canada have been worsening. This year, Delhi and Ottawa hit a diplomatic standoff. But that doesn't seem to matter all that much. Or maybe it's simply the love for maple syrup, because Indians are moving to Canada in record numbers. Last year, Indians became the biggest group to acquire Canadian citizenship. In 2022, Canada added a record number of 375,000 new citizens. The highest number among them were Indians at 60,000, a staggering jump of 174% from 2021. They were followed by Filipinos, Syrians and Pakistanis. But that's not the only race Indians won. Last year, they were at the forefront of migrating to OECD nations. OECD refers to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It constitutes 38 member states, including the US, France, Canada, Italy, Germany and Finland. But Indians aren't just migrating to these countries, they're also becoming its new citizens. India led in acquiring foreign citizenship to OECD countries, and America remains their dominant choice, much like the year before last. In 2021, 133,000 Indians acquired the citizenship of an OECD country. America welcomed the most Indian citizens at 56,000, followed by Australia at 24,000 and Canada at 21,000. That's not all. Many among those leaving India are high net worth individuals or HNWIs. This year, about 6,500 HNWIs are likely to leave the country, making India the second highest in terms of HNWI outflow. China takes the lead with a loss of 13,500 individuals. The story is clear. A growing number of Indians are willing to surrender their passports. In the past decade, 1.5 million Indians have relinquished their citizenship. The question is, why? Migration is not a recent phenomenon in India. It has the largest emigrant population globally, with 18 million people living outside their homeland. However, all Indian immigrants don't necessarily renounce their citizenship, but when they do, the reasons are multifold. Reports say socio-economic factors play a role. Some may be looking for a higher standard of living. Others could be on the lookout for increased political stability or lower taxation. Maybe even more personal freedom, for a breath of fresh air, sometimes quite literally. Pollution levels in India are spiking again. The nation is home to one of the most polluted cities in the world, its capital, New Delhi. One may want to escape this. Ease of mobility is another factor. The stronger the passport, the more visa-free access to other countries. And India ranks at the 80th position in terms of passport strength out of 199. But despite the outflow, India is poised to become one of the world's fastest wealth markets by 2031. Only time will tell if that is appealing enough to those chasing OECD countries.
In 2021, an American professor predicted a sustained mass exodus. He said that many people will leave their jobs due to the pandemic. It sounded like an ominous prophecy, but if it helps, he gave it a cool name. He called this phenomenon the Great Resignation. And he was right. In 2021, a record number of people quit their jobs. In the US, this number stood at 47 million. It's been 2 years since. The overall quit rate in America is reaching the pre-pandemic normal. The Great Resignation is finally over, except for the C-suite. For CEOs, the big quit is just ramping up. Just look at the numbers. In the first half of 2021, some 76 CEOs left their post globally. It was considered a big deal. 76 in 6 months, higher than the total in all of 2020, and a 23% jump since 2018. It was called a C-suite turnover spike. But cut to today, CEOs are having their worst year in decades. So far this year, more than 1,400 have left their jobs. 1,400 chief executives have quit US companies. That's the highest in the past 2 decades. Almost a 50% rise for the same period last year. What kind of companies are they leaving? The government and non-profit sector are the worst hit. The technology sector came in second. A number of women CEOs have also abandoned boardrooms. A 19% increase from the same period last year. The question is why? Why are CEOs leaving their jobs at a record-breaking clip? The specific details of CEO exits are typically undisclosed, but according to experts, a few reasons contribute. Many CEOs are trading fatigue for family life, much like former YouTube CEO Susan Wojcicki. She stepped down after 9 years in the role to quote-unquote start a new chapter focused on her family and health. Corner office or not, everyone needs a break. Stress is hitting workers young. Surveys say 42% managers face burnout regularly. And this builds over time. CEOs spend their lives climbing the corporate ladder. But now many are opting out. And that's not the only reason. The US workforce is also shrinking. More baby boomers are reaching retirement age. Now, these are people born around the mid-20th century. They're called baby boomers. Plus, the average CEO is 8 years older at higher now than 2 decades ago. So this year, 22% of all CEO exits were retirements. In some cases, CEOs are stepping down thanks to their own actions. Since the Me Too movement, workplace behavior has come under increased scrutiny. More calls for diversity and inclusion have been made. Corporate boards are paying more attention, and the result is visible. This year, the CEO of Chicago Board Options Exchange, Edward Tilley, and BP chief Bernard Looney both had to resign. Why? Because they failed to disclose personal relationships with employees. Now, whatever be the reason, resignations are piling up fast. So far, the numbers speak to the great resignation in the US. For other countries, the situation is still unclear. Data is not available. Studies are underway about the state of the C-suite in the post-pandemic world. But here's what research says. The world over, a few decades ago, the average CEO tenure stood at 12 years. Today, it has decreased to about 5 to 7 years. Chief executives globally are moving out faster than before. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. India celebrating the joyous festival of Dussehra, also known as Vijay Dashmi. According to Hindu mythology, it marks the victory of good over evil. In Brazil's Rio de Janeiro, paramilitary gangsters torched dozens of buses after a senior paramilitary leader was killed by police forces. In the US state of Louisiana, a super fog led to a pileup of 156 vehicles, leaving 7 people dead and many others injured. And finally, taking you back in history to 24th October 1945. On this day, the United Nations was established with the aim of maintaining peace and security after the end of the Second World War. Today, the UN is the world's premier international organization, but it has failed to stop wars. We're leaving you with this. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Jai Shri Ram!
I know she crossed in the Red Cross vehicle from Hamas, then crossed the Rafah border in the Egyptian side, and now she's supposed to cross over to us to the Israeli side.
דיברו איתה, היא דיברה, ואנחנו ממש בקרוב מחכים לראות אותה.
They talked to her and she spoke, and very soon we will see her, meet her, and unite with her. And we hope that this will open a door for the rest of the captives to be released, which is most important, even more than their release.
זה רק פתח והמשך.
יופדת נפשית. כמה לי? 85. What's your name?
It's okay, let's go. It's okay? Let's go.
Yes.
You go with this one.
Salam. Salam.
Okay. You go with this lady, I'll go with the other.
أيضا مزدوج كجنسية هاتين المحتجزتين. الجزء الأول من المعنى هو أنه هناك جهود تبذل مع جميع الأطراف.
صحيح.
وأنه هذه الجهود لها ثمار. هذه ثمرة من ثمار هذه الجهود.
هذا نابع من الثقة التي بنتها
صحيح.
القاهرة على مدار سنوات وعقود بالمناسبة محمد، يعني هذا ليس وليد الأزمة ولا وليد الأحداث والتطورات، هذا هو الدور التاريخي المصري الذي القاهرة اطلعت به وحملته على عاتقها طوال عقود طويلة يكافح فيها الشعب الفلسطيني
وعدم قطع
دخولهما إلى الأراضي المصرية عبر معبر رفح.
لكن المعنى الآخر الأكثر أهمية في رأيي من كل ذلك أنه هناك ثمار تجنى، هذه الثمار يمكن استغلالها
طبعا
لإقناع الطرف. الدماء الآن في المشهد الذي نتابعه، المشهد
صحيح.
شديد الإيلام، لإقناعه بأنه يعني عليه أن يهدئ من روعه بعض الشيء.
وبالمناسبة أتوقع أن يكون هناك جولات أخرى من جولات الإفراج.
Hello and welcome. You're watching the special broadcast. I'm Anusha Sonia. Top focus this hour continues to be the war in West Asia. As the war between Israel and Hamas continues, French President Emmanuel Macron is in Tel Aviv for the solidarity visit. Macron met Prime Minister Netanyahu and assured the support of France to Israel. Netanyahu has also reiterated that elimination of Hamas is their main objective. Israeli Defense Minister said that Israel is preparing for a multilateral operation on Hamas from air, ground and also sea. UN General Assembly will discuss the Israel-Hamas conflict on October 26th. As the humanitarian crisis in Gaza continues, 20 more trucks carrying vital humanitarian aid passed the Rafah crossing from Egypt into Gaza on Monday. Meanwhile, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said that explosion at Gaza hospital was likely caused by a missile launched from within Gaza towards Israel.
There is a battle here between the axis of evil led by Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, and there's the axis of the free world and the moderates who want to bring the world to the progress and prosperity of the 21st century. This is the battle. It's engaged now. The test for the West and for civilization is Hamas. If Hamas emerges victorious, we will all lose. Europe will be endangered. Everyone will be endangered. Civilization will be endangered. So if Hamas wins, if Hamas loses and is defeated, then the forces of civilization win. That is why this battle is not merely our own. It's Europe's battle. It's America's battle. It's civilization's battle. It's the battle for the heart and soul and the future of the Middle East and the Arab world.
I want to thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, not just for your time, but because I'm lucid about the fact that this fight against terrorism is obviously a matter of existence for Israel, but it's a matter of existence for all of us. This is why we discussed together, and I just reminded this issue, but I consider that this is an international coalition in order to fight against this